Hi everyone, this is Katie at Moonflower Moments. I'm hopping on here today to do a video response to Dawn Michelle's mid-year top 5 decks. And her video is a response to Marine at the Waves of Your Soul Tarot and her tag mid-year tarot tag. I wanted to do a response to Dawn's specifically because it focuses on tarot decks. And as usual, this year I really don't use a lot of Oracle. And so I really have never really used a lot of Oracle in my practice. And so I thought it was best for me just to focus on the tarot decks since that's where the base of my practice is. So the first deck that I wanted to share with y'all is going to be the Aztec Tarot. I am a massive fan of this deck. I think I'm not really going in any particular order in terms of my top 5 this year, but I think this one was the one that I thought of first, and so therefore it probably is my number 1 in terms of deck that I use this year. So I like the Aztec Tarot a lot. One of the reasons that I love it is because of the color palette. I live in a place that is hot all the time. Today's high is 98 degrees. And so I like that when I'm overwhelmed by the heat, I can turn to this deck for a nice, quick, easy read because the imagery is essentially Aztec illustrations of the RWS. So it doesn't require a lot of thought from me. It's a nice, clean, easy reader that I can rely on. But based off the color palette, it still has these warm, rich yellows and reds that just make it totally appropriate for summertime. But I've been using this deck since like probably about February. So one of my first videos that I made on this channel was explaining how I match wildflowers with decks. I'm going to leave a link in the description box below. And I paired this deck with one of my absolute favorite flowers that blooms all year long. So every time I go in my garden and I see that flower, I just get the itch to work with this deck. So it's been on my mind constantly. Its cardstock is beautiful. I have very small hands, so I have a hard time shuffling things. But this cardstock is linen. The cards are the appropriate size. It's not that thick of a deck. And so if you're looking for an easy reader with great cardstock, I would just have to recommend the Aztec Tarot for you. It's an indie deck, but very affordable as well. All right, the next deck I'm going to show is my Corte Anna. So this is the name of the deck. It's right there on the back if you need to pause it. And I am a big fan of this deck. So I'll talk a little bit about how I use it, and then I'll show you how I use it. So because these cards are smaller, I like to use them to establish connections between card positions. And so sometimes when I'm doing like a past, present, future reading, I'm like, okay, this is cool. I can kind of see, I understand each position, but I don't understand how one position connects to the other. So what I do is, and I oftentimes do this with Somnia, which is not one of my top 5, but it's just perfect for this. I lay out past, present, future. And if I pull a card, I use these small little Corte Annas to show the connection between this position and this position and this position and this position. So it gives me an opportunity to sort of fill in the blanks with my story. And so therefore, Corte Anna does something that nothing else in my collection does and is inherently extremely valuable for that reason. All right, next I'm going to throw in CBD, and this is another deck that I sometimes use because it's a little bit thinner for the same reason or the same purpose that I just showed the Corte Anna. The CBD is just a very basic, plain Jane Marseille, but it is completely and absolutely my jam. The cardstock is just like really good, delicious US Games cardstock, so it just has like this nice smooth feel without being overly glossy. I like Corte Anna because when working with a Marseille, I like Marseilles that aren't smudged. And so I like that this is just a clean, crisp image. It makes it easier for me to work with it because I can clearly see in terms of like reading Marseille, okay, we have 2 wands that are going through this gridlock. That shows a sense of like coming together with someone else to break through some sort of grid. And I think when like the artwork is a little bit smudged, it makes it more difficult for me to form that narrative in my mind. So CBD has been around forever, but I think it is one of the most potent, I would say, predictive decks that I own. There's something about the guidebook that is uncannily accurate. So when I read with a guidebook for this deck, I'll have a particular issue in mind. I'll pull a card, I'll go to the guidebook, and it just matches with almost 100% accuracy every single time. So it's a really good reader. And so CBD had to make the list. I was using this probably for about 5 weeks, 6 weeks at the beginning of the year. I've put it up, but it's on my table, so I think it'll come back into rotation soon. All right, next I'm going to throw in my Enchanted Forest, and I'm so happy it finally made a list. I love the Enchanted Forest, but if I had to redo, or if I could redo my overlooked decks tag that I did to Simon at the Hermit's Cave, I probably would throw this in there. This is a deck that, for face, on its face, everything is perfect about this deck. Like, I cannot imagine a more atmospheric, storytelling deck to dive into. But for some reason, it doesn't get a lot of use until I watched Marlena's Everyday Carry Tarot series, where people picked a deck that they could like throw in their bag and they could just use while they're on the go. And I selected this deck to be my Everyday Carry Tarot for school. So I am like an English teacher, so I wanted a deck that embodied that English storytelling mood, but also, you know, didn't have any nudity, didn't have any content that would be worrisome. It's not like I'm pulling out the cards in front of the children, but I wanted to make sure that like it was just school appropriate in my mind. And so I thought that this deck was the best fit for that. And I got into a routine to where I was pulling one of these cards every single day, and I would leave them behind my desk to where only I could see it. And these guys became like my daily guidance during school. Oftentimes school is so hectic, especially with the classes that I teach, that there's not a lot of time to breathe and to catch your breath in between every section. And so just glancing up at this card every now and again reminded me to be more intentional about my day, to be more purposeful about my day, and gave me that little hint of wisdom that I needed to just carry on and keep going. So this was my Everyday Carry deck for a very long time. Now that summer is in motion, I haven't pulled from it that much, but I think come August, this will reclaim its rightful space in my bag. So this was Enchanted Forest. All right, so here's number 5, and then I have some honorable mentions. Number 5 has to be my William Blake Tarot. Are y'all sick of hearing me talk about this one yet? So, I love this deck. This is, I don't know, I don't have anything to say about it other than the fact it gets me. Since I am someone who is driven a lot by words, I like that some of the minors have little quotes on it from William Blake himself's poetry. There's something very potent about the imagery, like the bright, vivid colors, that reminds me of summertime. But I've also been using this deck a lot to make creative decisions in terms of my YouTube channel, my Instagram page, and some poetry that I've been writing. It is, I think the name of the deck, let me go look at the guidebook to see. It's technically called the William Blake Tarot of the Creative Imagination. So all of the entries in the guidebook bring it back to the creative process here. So I find that it is really good when you're trying to make creative decisions. And I've used this deck a couple of times to help me kind of establish my own voice in spaces like this and just to give general advice. So William Blake does a lot of things for me, but especially how I've been using it creatively this year, it had to make the top 5. Now, in terms of my honorable mentions, these are all decks that I've been having a little bit of a love affair with, but I think that by the end of the year, they'll probably solidify into my top 10 as well. But I've gotten them more recently. So this one is going to be Fifth Spirit. This is one of my honorable mentions for this year. This was the first deck that ever taught me that modern decks can have a lot of depth to them. I know that sounds a little bit pretentious, but I've been using a lot of historic decks and a lot of garden decks, which to me feel inherently rich with imagery and with purpose and just beyond the surface level. And then I got this deck and I was like, wow, modern decks can have a lot of depth too. And I kind of feel embarrassed like mentioning that, but I feel like I fell into that stereotype of, oh, decks like this don't have anything to teach me. And I was completely wrong. So I think that this deck forms a valuable place in my collection because of that. It's the only modern deck that I own, but because of it, it helps me to see that this might be a genre that I'm more interested in exploring. I brought this deck to the Pride Fest downtown this past weekend, and when we got into the car, me and my friends, I pulled the Queen of Pentacles, and I just thought it was a beautiful description of our day, because then in the next couple of hours, we had people coming up to us that we were friends with, that we had known from work, saying, would you like water? Do you want to go back to our house so you can rest? We have food that we can give you, da 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 da. And so it was a beautiful way to embody that, or to interact with that Queen of Pentacles energy, to let other people take care of us, to feel supported, to feel nurtured, and it perfectly was a great descriptor of our day. So it was a core memory that I had with this deck that I think that is going to solidify it probably in my top 10 for all year, but it's too early to tell is what I'm going to say. So Fifth Spirit definitely taught me some new things this year. Also in the month of June, I got Nola Tarot of Cats with its lovely, lovely, lovely linen cardstock. This deck speaks my speak, not only because it represents a place in my home state, but I haven't mentioned this before, but I'm a massive cat fan. Like I love kitty cats. I have 2 of them. And so I get what these little kitty cats are trying to tell me. I think that their faces can just be very, like, she looks like she is in the middle of loafing on the floor after having a good meal. So she is definitely giving me Queen of Pentacles from that facial expression. So I've been enjoying this deck a lot too. I've been pairing this deck with Southern Gothic, which I showed in my last video. I'll leave in the description box below. And so we've been getting along really great. This is Nola Tarot of Cats. I think it'll make my top 10 as well. All right, and this is my last honorable mention. This is Dream Enchantress. I wanted this deck ever since I started watching YouTube, which was about 2 years ago. But I put it off and put it off and put it off. And this is one that just recently came into my collection. I'm definitely leaning into this energy as we embrace Cancer season. I am a Cancer, and I feel like this is a very Cancer-like deck because of the way that the colors blend together, because of all the blues. There's also a fair bit of water too that's depicted in the deck. And I think the way that the cards are depicted, there's a lot of like movement, like water. So it's been matching the current atmosphere, but I've really been enjoying working with this with the guidebook. Since it's a Los Scarabeo guidebook, you kind of expect it to be a little bit wacky and like sometimes not make sense, but this one is wacky and it makes complete sense. So it's taught me to kind of re-examine my bias against Los Scarabeo guidebooks and just to give them another chance. So Dream Enchantress is just a powerful little deck, and I think it's going to make it into my top 10 too, but we'll see. It's still very new to the collection. All right, so this was fun just hopping on here to share. I can't wait to see at the end of the year if any of the decks that I mentioned make my top 10 list, or, you know, I like how things come and go, right? We can go through moods and shifts when using tarot. So I hope that everyone has a great day, and if y'all want to see the original videos, I'll leave them linked below. Thank y'all so much.